Hey everybody, welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I'm your host, Mike Malatesta. I'm an entrepreneur who's founded and led 2 8-figure companies. I'm also an investor, author, speaker, and lifetime learner. On this podcast, I explore stories of success in every episode and with every guest. What it means, why it's important, and of course, how it happens. You can subscribe, connect, and learn more about me at mikemalatesta.com. Today, I'm fulfilling my promise to you with another amazing success story. Andy Graham is joining me on the podcast. Andy is the CEO of Alen Air Purifiers, headquartered in Austin, Texas. He's also deeply curious, caring, and creative. A self-described fixer and developer, Andy's a guy that people turn to when they need help. He believes that where there is chaos, there is also opportunity, and he's passionate about listening to understand before making any decision. Here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I just want to start by saying how grateful I am to everyone who listens to the How Did It Happen podcast and how lucky I feel to be able to share such inspirational stories of success like the one we'll be talking about today with Andy Graham with all of you. It's been a really cool journey and a journey that I get a lot of energy from. So thank you for that. And with that, Andy, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Mike. Glad to be here.
I'm happy to have you. I've been looking forward to this because I first heard about Andy through Cynthia Cleveland, and Cynthia's episode, maybe came out a month or so ago, where at least from when I'm recording this, and she's an executive coach and a lot of other things and a YPOer, and we got hooked up and we had a great conversation. And then like people often do, once we're on the show, they say, hey, you should meet this person and you should meet this person. And one of the people that she said I should meet is with us today, Andy Graham. So stay tuned for some great stuff. Andy, I start every one of my podcasts with the same simple question. How did it happen for you?
I'm a deeply curious, caring, and creative person. I just always have been, about how things work, why people do what they do, how do you make better decisions. I made a battery-powered fan for my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Marlowe, which is not a typical thing when you're a 3rd grader. So I'm just a naturally curious person who loves to observe and to connect the dots perhaps differently than others. And that's just led me to a lot of learning, and it led me to failure, which is part of learning. And it's led me to be in a cool place now where I literally get to build things that help a lot of people, especially right now.
And when you say curious, Andy, a lot of people say they're curious or that they've got a lot of curiosity. I say that all the time. I write that all the time. But what does it mean to you, and where did it come from? Where you said 3rd grade. I don't know. When's the first time you remember your curiosity being maybe different than other people's?
I just love to take things apart. And when I was a kid, I would take things apart and see how they worked and put them back together. And there's a big difference. There are people that can take things apart and not put them back together. But I discovered that I had a mind and a memory and an ability to envision the way things were put together, the way they worked. And so when it came time to put them back together, that was pretty effortless for me. I fixed a lot of things. I like to ride motorcycles ever since I was 9 years old, and we lived in the country, so it was your form of recreation because you were in a city. And so what would happen is we had these little Honda mini bikes, and they would quit running, and the place you could get them repaired was a long way away. So out of necessity, I figured out how you needed to adjust the exhaust valve on those things to get them running again, and that sort of became the local mechanic of sorts. And so but there was some confidence that came with that. I had a guy pull up in my yard one time and said, I heard you can fix motorcycles. And I said, yeah, that's true. And he had a larger motorcycle that was popping out of gear. And he said, "Can you fix that?" And I said, "Sure," not ever having seen a transmission in a motorcycle before. And so here I am, I think I was 12 or 13, pulling this large motor out, cracking the bottom off of it, and figuring out that the shifter forks were worn on one side and not the other, and just deducing that, well, they were bent, and then having to fix that, put it all back together. And so it's just led me to a place of risk taking out of curiosity to be able to do things that help people. I don't know. For me, things that are broken or bent are like a splinter in my mind, and I try to do something about that. And especially where it involves impacting, the lives of people. So the caring part comes into, wanting to work on things that are going to make a difference in a person's life in a way that the light bulbs go off, or they smile, or there's some relief of pain.
And was that this sort of curiosity about fixing things? Maybe it also was. I understand you grew up on a farm. Is that correct?
That's right.
So it's probably a necessity as well if you're going to be successful on a farm.
Yeah, I think farming is one of the purest forms of entrepreneurship, right? You can't control the weather. You plant things, you put in the effort. If you do that with timing and with planning, and you hope for a good result, but it's not guaranteed. Uh, but it gives you a sharper sense of what's inside your control and what's outside of your control, and you make peace with that difference. And so that you're right. Out of necessity, you do a lot of things because there's not someone around to do that. So this capacity to figure things out is really important. And I think that's true in entrepreneurship. As my professional journey, I've found so many parallels between farming and starting companies or being in the business world. It's striking to me.
I was very, very fortunate in my first company to work with a partner who grew up on a vegetable farm and it was just it's all he ever wanted to be. And unfortunately, the farm failed at some point, and that was not in the cards any longer. But he was the most extraordinary person because not only could he fix things and stuff, but he could sort of like what you said with the transmission and the shifting forks. You could look at something and deduce a cause and a fix, where other people like me are looking at it and like, well, duh, I know it doesn't work, but outside of that, I could be looking at the exact same thing and just not have the instinct or whatever it is, along with the talent to see what was wrong and understand how to fix it, like remove that splinter, like you said. That was a really cool thing you said about the splinter in your mind. And then along the years, multiple other guys joined us who had similar backgrounds, and it was always, I mean, we always had problems, but nothing seemed like a problem for them. There was always a way to work it out where everybody else was standing around kind of waiting for somebody to do something. It was an amazing experience for me to be around people who grew up in that environment.
Yeah, I think things have to be mentally visual. You have to be able to picture it in your mind and be able to examine it from a number of dimensions to understand how to fix something. So, or how to address a strategic problem, even because if you don't have a fundamental grasp of the theory of operation, or you can't picture it in your mind and see the associations from things and sort of just picture it in motion and see what's happening, it's hard to do diagnosis, or it's hard to make changes, or you end up guessing. So I fix, in my neighborhood, I fix lawnmowers and things just as a way to meet neighbors. And so it's always interesting to see how guys show up, particularly guys show up, and they've tried everything in the world, from a linear point of view. Let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. But if you don't understand the fundamental theory of operation of something, you're in a difficult spot to fix it or to develop a strategy around it. it doesn't. It's. But on the other hand, I build bikes in my shop. We're on bike number 14, and I do that with a group of guys. It's kind of like Huck Finn meets or Tom Sawyer meets Motorheads or something, where everybody has something to do, and it's really a process of everybody has a role to play, and whether you're repairing a thing or building a team or whatever, I think leaders particularly have to be able to picture things in their mind and to um, uh, just have that vision just further ahead enough to be able to take the risk out of things for other people.
Yeah, so you can imagine and you can articulate what it needs to look at, but you look like maybe, but you may as the leader not be able to on your own get it to look like that.
Yeah, exactly, right.
And in your neighborhood, is the word on you being like the guy to go to repair stuff? Has that just gotten out on its own, or is what? Just curious how it makes its way around. Is like one person tells the other, or do you have a little sign like, if you're a neighbor, come see me if you got something broken?
No, this is we're in a pocket of homes where they have a pretty active Facebook group. So
Okay.
you just put it on the Facebook group that you do that, and word gets around, I guess, that way. In fact, before this podcast, one of my neighbors was texting me, "Have you looked at my chainsaw yet?" I'm like, "Well, this weekend I'll look at it."
Okay. Okay. Cool. And you mentioned bikes that you're building. What kind of bikes are you building?
We've done everything from our first bike in this shop was a 75 Norden Commando, 850 Commando. It hadn't run for 38 years. It was hand-me-down from an estate sale, and it came across, I came across it, and we just got a group of guys together and stripped it down and built it back up, got it into a motorcycle show. And so we worked on Nordens, we worked on Ducatis, we worked on Hondas, of course. We even did a 58 Pook sold by Sears. Actually, it was a two-stroke twin, a twin 250 two-stroke. Again, for a neighbor, that thing hadn't run in a long time, and it's always amazed me how you can take a group of guys who are just anybody, and these things just have always amazed me how well they've turned out. So.
So just this is pure coincidence, but I figure I'm going to bring it up. So you're in Austin. I was in Dallas over the weekend, and I went to the Bobby Haas Moto Museum. Have you ever been there?
In Dallas, I don't think so. No.
Okay. Well, if you get an opportunity, it's HAAS Museum, and that guy has he has a phenomenal motorcycle collection in this museum. And I'm not a huge motorcycle enthusiast, but when I went through that museum, Andy, the art that went into making and restoring these bikes, he's got everything from the late 1800s all the way up to these 2020 custom things that you probably would never take on the road or anything. Hundreds of them. It's just an amazing place that's worth, for someone like you, it sounds like it's worth checking out.
Oh yeah, I definitely I will. I haven't heard of it, but I would say that as much as I'm into that, it's actually more about the fellowship. It's the relationship you get to develop as you're doing this sort of thing. Like, one of my neighbors is, he's in his mid 60s, right, and he's retired, and he was he was reaming out a Norton Oilite bronze bushing, and I made a tool for him to do it, and he looked up at me with almost tears in his eyes, and he said, "My dad never showed me how to do stuff." So it's this idea of being with other people, doing things, sharing what you know. I just love that. So to me, it is far less about the bike. It's much more about the fellowship, really.
Okay. All right. Got it. And the farming, what happened to the farming? I know you went away to college, but was farming something you considered? Your parents still farm? What's
No, First off, it was my parents were separated, and so my mom and I and my younger brother and the older step siblings kind of ran the farm. So I wanted to stay because I liked farming, but my mom's background was one of scarcity because she was one of 11 kids. So she just was bound and determined that I was not going to stay on the farm. I was going to go to college and pursue a professional career and have opportunities she didn't have. And I don't know if you ever met my mom, but what I say about her is true. She's the best man I ever met. She just did not. There's no such word as can't. You know, we are not going to stop. She just was the most persistent person I've ever met, and has the war stories to back it up. Right. So she just said, "Hey, you're going to get out there and pursue something beyond farming." And of course, I did. I got a marketing degree in the University of South Carolina, and got a job making another kind of living selling semiconductors in right out of college, and sort of from there, it all kind of started from there. But so I wanted to, but I skipped the 11th grade in high school just because she said you can do it. So I was in college by the time I was 16. So.
Huh. Okay, so from her perspective, it was just out of the question. That is not going to be the life. Yeah. Okay. And did she continue, or is she still with us? Had she continued to farm, or what became of her life?
No, she didn't. I mean, it's a long story, but my oldest brother was a prominent attorney in our small town, and he was bipolar. And this was back in an era where mental illness was not very well understood. So he made a number of unfortunate financial decisions, and so we lost the farm, and my mom ended up moving, down to the coast, and by that time I was off in college anyway. So she's still with us. She's 96 now, and but no, we left the farm under unfortunate circumstances, which again, right, life throws you these things, and uh, setbacks and failures and things like that. But she never stopped. She went on to manage, the kitchen in a local school district or something like that, and just took it over and took it out of the red and got it into the black. So she was like I said, best man I ever met.
And your brother, how is he doing?
Oh, he's back in North Carolina. He's in North Carolina actually. He's got a job with doing project management or something like that. Our nuclear family kind of split and went their different ways just because of the nature of the things that happened there.
I see.
And so I left and went to Arizona. I went to Atlanta, then Orlando, Florida, then to Arizona, and then eventually to Austin, Texas. So all of them are back east, and I'm the one that set off out west and chose a different career path.
Okay. All right. I appreciate you taking us through that. It just helps me get an understanding for who you are and where you've come from. So thank you for that. So you get this first position out of college selling semiconductors. In what industry were you selling into?
I worked for. I was in the electronics industry. This is back in the early days of the microprocessor and the single board computer. So I was selling single board computers and microprocessors to companies that were essentially applying that technology to new things. So back in those areas, I'm an old guy. So back in those areas, and when I was in Atlanta, it was selling to Lanier, which made dictating machines, or if you're automating factories, right, you're putting electronics into factories that make plastic bottles and things like that, because Atlanta is the home of Coca-Cola, right, for example.
Yeah, okay.
So
Sure.
so think of it as putting selling small computers into a number of different applications where The consumer would hardly ever see it, but they were embedded computing, for another way to say it.
Okay. So would that be like selling to like Rockwell Automation, for example, or those kinds of companies? Okay.
Yeah, it would be selling to Rockwell or computer companies like Gould Modicon was a computer company, fault tolerant computer company in Florida. You'd be selling to, you know, uh, I mean, I'm going way back there. I would say we had one of my customers was somebody who made smart digital signs back in those eras, right? So you needed a microprocessor, you needed controls for that, right? And so it was almost all custom work. So you'd buy the parts and develop the software and build a custom instance, right, of how that would work.
Okay. And then you, at least according to the research I've done, you've had, a number of president, CEO roles. I can't tell if, so I'm going to ask if you started any of the organizations that you became president or CEO of, but I guess really, how did you make the transition from the sales position to, these higher, how'd you move up?
Sure. Well, first off, I think sales is a great baseline experience for anybody in leadership, right? Because sales is developing people relationship skills and emotional intelligence, and to be able to understand other people and to be able to serve them, whether they're a customer, an employer, or whatever. So I think that was helpful. So I moved from sales into channel management for distribution at Motorola. And so that was a bit of a turnaround situation because there were a lot of problems. And so I was kind of the fixer brought in to, turn those kind of things around internally. And so when you fix something, it sort of leads to a level of progression if you're wired like me, because you're not a maintainer, you're a fixer and a developer, right? There's got to be some level of growth. So I always ended up going into, as one of my old bosses says, Andy, where there's chaos, there's opportunity, right? So I was never afraid of situations that needed attention or that had a bad reputation or otherwise, were not attractive for a career. So I never considered my career as moving from one attractive thing to the next. I always thought of it as go where the problems are and then be able to make a contribution or chart a new path that hadn't been considered. So what that led me to is a place inside of Motorola where we were in the custom silicon business, and we were competing with much larger companies that had specialized software and that were far ahead of us. And so I just judged that we weren't going to catch them by trying to beat them at their own game, because developing custom software is a very long and expensive thing. So I just went out in the marketplace and found a bunch of third-party companies and pieced together the capability that we needed. And what I found in that is that there was no agreed standards for how design software for chips was really supposed to work together. And so myself and an engineer in a polyester suit founded a not-for-profit called the CAD Framework Initiative, which was essentially a standardization effort, a de facto standardization effort back in the late 80s. And so we started that organization, and I was appointed the CEO of that. And so that was my first real CEO job, which is leading an industry effort. And when I ran that for 12 years, and then we were successful in setting a standard in that industry, which is very hard to do. Not a lot of people succeed at that. And then from there, I decided I wanted to work on things that my wife and kids would understand, because explaining how you spent your day helping a industry agree to API standards that support a design engineer in a building working on a chip that goes into so by the time you get to the fourth iteration of that, they will say, well, Dad works on computers or something, right? We don't know.
Yeah, right. I gotta get it down to like 5 words, right?
Exactly. Like, what is the thing? And so I was CEO of that for, like I said, 12 years. And then a friend and I co-founded a startup, which was early in the mobile phone business to sell applications on mobile phones. And I like that a lot because mobile phones I could see that was going to touch everybody on the planet. And your ability to reach and have influence on that platform was huge. And then on top of that, right, it was something that my wife understood. It's like, oh, you're working with mobile phones. And I like working in an early part of the industry where there were growth opportunities because frankly, the semiconductor industry by the early '90s became more and more commoditized. With countries competing with one another based off of cheap capital, it just wasn't fun anymore for me. So working with things that touch consumer lives was just a lot more interesting at that time. So.
And the fixer role, I want to sort of dive into that a little bit because for a lot of leaders, that's a scary role. Like, so, getting put into a situation where things are not working well or as good as someone wants them to. It takes, well, it's kind of scary for a lot of people. It takes a special skill set. I'm wondering, since you've had multiple opportunities to do that and thrive on the challenge, what was your approach to coming into from a people standpoint? Let's take that separate from the technology. And the reason I'm asking is because nobody wants to be associated with something that's not working, right? So you've got these people who are probably working very hard, and despite their efforts, the results are not where they need to be or where someone wants them to be. How do you come in? What's your approach when you come into a situation like that?
I think I'm going to go back to where we started the conversation about curiosity, right?
Yeah.
When you walk into a situation, especially if you've got mileage and you've done a number of things, you're going to have this strong tendency to pattern match very quickly and say, oh, put a label on something and say, oh, it's this or it's that or it's something else. And you may be right, but what I've found is that you have to walk in and spend enough time listening and absorbing and watching long enough, right, with a fresh curiosity about what's really going on, because most of what's happening is really not apparent. Because in a messed up situation, people will talk about the apparent things, but it's looking for what's not obvious that's really the key, right? Hmm. And so that the first thing is just be really curious and to watch carefully without doing too much early pattern matching, because if you come to a conclusion too quickly, you will end up going, down perhaps the wrong path. I think the second one is be careful about assigning motive to people. Really, people don't relate to people. What they really do is they relate to their idea of other people, right? It's your idea of someone that's conditioning your behavior. Because I just met you, Mike. I know something about you, but I don't know you. So I have to continually inform my idea of you, right? Sure. And be careful of stewarding that, lest I assign motive to you. Oh, Mike's doing this thing for this reason or whatever, right? Because that leads you to not prejudge people. And then I think the third thing I tend to do is to go, well, is clarity. Is it clear is it clear why we're doing what we're doing? Is it clear what we're doing? And is it clear how we're doing what we're doing? And so if there's a lack of clarity anywhere along those, then you can have people going in different directions, right? So I read the Bible. So the Bible says, where there is no vision, the people are unrestrained. What that means is if there's a lack of clarity, you have people going in all kinds of different directions, and they may be doing, perfectly fine in their mind or whatever, but without that level of alignment and a purpose that you're marching toward. And then the last thing is there's there's got to be some sort of epic story behind or narrative that people can believe and be a part of and want to belong to, right? People don't want to belong to companies or teams. They really want to belong to stories, and those stories have other people along it. If you ever watch the movie Lord of the Rings, right?
Yeah.
You could say Frodo was on a mission, but really what he was doing is he realized he was part of a story in a way that if he didn't play his part, it wasn't going to happen, right? And then there were other people, but it's part of the stories, right? So stories are what glue, what travel, what knit things. And I've become I'm a movie guy anyway, but picture yourself in a compelling movie. What makes it compelling? Well, you can see yourself as being part of that story.
So I love that. The story, the company's story, for example, is one thing, but the meaning of the story to me as a person is what really glues me to the organization or to the mission. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, because at the core, everybody wants to be honored. Everybody wants to be seen, and everybody wants to be honored. And you can't do that. People don't come out and say, I want to be honored this way. What they do is they see it as a reflection of a story that they're a part of, and they can picture themselves as being part of that and their role in it and their contribution in it. Like when we finished that Norton Commando, that very first bike, and it started up on that first night, and I hadn't pre-started it. I didn't know if it was going to run or not. But on the third kick, that thing fired up, and you could look around the room and you could see that they were all thinking, I have a piece in that. Oh, yeah. I have a piece in that. And you can never take that away from them, right? It was just, even now I get chills thinking about that moment where they had something in a way that could never be taken from them, right? They were part of it. They saw it come to life. They saw they saw these things come together in that way, and so that was I wrote it without breaks that night. When I came back, we didn't quite fling the champagne glasses in the fireplace like the French do, but we did. We celebrated the honoring of the moment, right? And so when you do all those things with a situation that's really messed up, what people end up doing is you're really doing three things. You're creating, you're unifying, and you're redeeming. And those three things is what repairs a culture. And then you get what you celebrate. Then celebrations take on more meaning, right? Because you were part of something that is a reflection of who you are, a tapestry, if I can use that as an illustration, right? So,
and how do you? I'm sure you've run into people who, regardless of how compelling the vision or the story is, at least in your mind, and it seems to be resonating with other people, how do you deal with that person or those persons who, for whatever reason, are unwilling or unable to make their own meaning out of the story?
Well, I think, Jim Collins wrote quite a while back. He said, it's important to, have the right seats on the bus and the right people in the right seats. And that's a fairly staple thing. I think that you have to here's the way I would say it. You have to have a way of telling yourself the truth, and all progress starts with the truth, right? And the truth is, if your heart's not in it, you're in the wrong place, right? If it's not really in it, you're just in the wrong place. And it's not for everybody. I think that's the other thing is it's okay to not be part of this story and be part of another one. It's okay.
Sure. It doesn't diminish you as a person. It's just that.
Not at all. Yeah. It's not personal at all. It may not be your thing. It may not be your timing. It may not be your circumstances. Sometimes people are wounded in a certain way that they don't have the capacity to be part of a mission that you're going on, right? And so again, back to not assigning motive. It's not they're a bad person or whatever, or labeled in a certain way. It's like your heart's got to really be in it from a timing standpoint, from a aligning with your own personal values and beliefs, right? And from the standpoint of is this the culture you want to be part of? So for one of the most exciting things I've done in this latest company is we re-engineered the culture of a company that was 15 years old, and yet we became more of who we were in the beginning, because we were able to say it's about care, it's about collaboration, it's about imagination, it's about adaptability. Because the one constant is if you're not growing, you're going backwards, right?
So two more questions, and then I want to get more into to that. The first is the all progress starts with the truth is a Dan Sullivanism. Are you in strategic coach, or is that something you've picked up somewhere else? I'm just curious.
I'm familiar with his work, but no,
Okay.
I'm not working with him or necessarily a student of him. I would say I read a lot,
Yeah.
and I say, and I'm the purveyor of much, but originator of few.
Okay. Well, that's fine. It's one of my I was first introduced to that saying through him, and it's one of my favorite sayings in the world. And I say it all the time to the folks that I work with, because if we're not willing to acknowledge what the truth is, we're going to have a really hard time, figuring out where we're going or how to get there. And the truth is okay. It's not a bad thing. The truth is the light, right? It's the guide. So it yeah. Okay. So anyway, continue to use that. It's very powerful, I would say. Um, Second thing was about this pattern match, and I've been thinking about that ever since you said it, because uh, a lot of us, and I'll put myself into this group, and you're probably there too. I mean, when you come into something and you think you see something you've seen before, so your immediate sort of instinct is to say, "Here's what we do," and that may actually be the quickest way to solve that particular problem. But in the meantime, you're sending a message to all the other people around you saying, how could you, even though you may not ever say this, how could you not see that simple solution or whatever? So the way you walk through that and advised us to really restrain ourselves from, well, you can't restrain yourself from pattern matching, but you can restrain yourself from acting on the pattern match until you, as you said, another great thing, honored all of the people around you. You can get to the solution that you may have known from the beginning, but the goal, if I'm hearing you right, isn't it's really for them to develop the solution and believe in it. Yeah, it's not going to be your idea at the end, even though it could have been your idea at the beginning. If it's their idea at the end, that's a big win. Am I on track there with your thinking?
Absolutely right. That's exactly right. It's being okay with not being the smartest person in the room, being okay with cultivating a new conventional wisdom, or cultivating a new state where as the collaboration, the level of collaboration rises, right? It's born of anybody's idea, and it gets me back to something I mentioned as a substrate, or the foundation of everything I just told you, is that's not possible if the culture or the temperature in the culture is not safe. Because when it's safe, people will admit mistakes. When it's safe, people will raise their hand and go, I got an idea, and they won't feel like they're going to be ridiculed for it, right? If it's safe, you'll be able to say, that creative work could be better. I think it could be better this way. It's not taken personally, right?
Hmm.
And so that level of safety is something I work hard to establish. And you just hit on it, which is that if you want the best ideas from people, you have to be able to create that level of environment. Um, Otherwise, people will be telling you what they think you want to hear. So.
and then they'll be telling everyone else that they don't believe in what you are doing.
Exactly, right. So there's a huge difference between building a compliance culture versus a truly creative culture. A compliance culture is trying to figure out how to get the right answer to please the boss or to be in the right position or, avoid mistakes. The creative culture and Ed Catmull at Pixar wrote about this is, how do you get a bunch of creative people to be constructively critical of one another for the higher good? Well, that's one of the ways you do it. So.
And in your current role as CEO, I should have asked you at the beginning, I want to say it's Alan, is that right? Or is it Alen?
It's Alan.
Alan, okay. I just wanted to be sure because there's not two L's and I don't want to mispronounce it. So, so you sort of intimated in your current role which you've had for 3 years or a little over 3 years, that you came into a situation, a 15-year-old company thereabouts, and maybe, well, you tell me what was it that attracted you to the situation? What did you find when you got there, or what did you know when you took the opportunity?
Well, in this company, it turned out a couple of really good friends of mine worked here that I knew and I have respect for, and so I had some awareness of what the company was doing and what it was about, and I knew the founder of the company for at least 10 years, I think, before getting involved, and so he asked me to come help him with some technology challenges because a lot of products now are connected and with connected to the internet, and you can do all kinds of cool things with them. And so when I came in here in February of 18, I thought I was coming here to work on that and in a part-time basis, and because I was not really looking to do another thing. But when I got here, what I quickly saw is this is a company with great bones. The product was very soundly engineered. The commitment to making something that actually worked was palpable because we're in an era of just throwaway product, right? Things are there's designed obsolescence and like I said, I grew up on a farm with John Deere tractors, so it spoke to me that the product was built to last, right? And that it was a thoughtful way. So I saw a company with great bones and a great customer position. But I saw a founder, and I'd been there before myself, who had put himself in a situation of having developed the company to a point where you really needed to let go and let it become, and from an adolescent to an adult, right? And founders, it's a very difficult transition for founders to shift from founder to CEO, to build capacity of a much larger organization, because you have to deliberately replicate yourself. You have to let go of things. And then what's working against you, if you've been at it a long time, is you have a high degree of familiarity. So you will tell yourself that, it may be difficult to let go of certain things. So I saw him being not at his best. And then, as it turns out, he was diagnosed with stage 4 nasal cancer in the end of 2018 over Christmas. And so what was initially a help out thing became, hey, you're CEO, right? So,
okay.
And so I started that role. He went through chemotherapy and proton radiation in 2019. And so during 2019, I treated the company like I would a motorcycle. I just tore it apart and worked at from the technology standpoint, the people standpoint, the process standpoint, and back to your point. And there were a number of people whose heart were not in it, either because they'd been in it too long or for a number of reasons. So we had some restructuring that was going on, and then 2020 the pandemic hit, and then fortunately we were in a good position to be able to to stand underneath what became an extraordinary period of of growth and strain for us.
Sure. And so if I'm hearing you right, if the pandemic had come in, say, sometime in 2018 or early 2019, you may not have been as prepared to make the impact that you have.
Well, well, that's true, but we had some practice. Since I've been here for the last 3 years, California wildfires have gotten progressively worse
Okay.
in the fall, and when those happen, you just have a huge spike in demand. I mean, I've been on, you know, customer chats late at night with people in California during those things where the smoke is coming in the house and they're trying to get a product to protect their child in their bedroom, and you just you just it's like a storm. When it hits really hard, and it puts a big strain on your logistics and being able to get product where it needs to be. So
Yeah. So when the company was founded, and maybe up to the time that you came in, we hadn't, in the U.S. at least, had a pandemic. So you're making this air purification equipment for other purposes, I presume, during most of the company's history. Although maybe there was some SARS activity that you got involved with, prior. I don't know, but what? So I'm interested in the shift. If I'm right in thinking that the products were maybe weren't for killing a virus necessarily, or a virus like this. What, am I right about that? And if so, what was your sort of core focus, and then what did it become after COVID-19 became a thing?
sure. So what I would say is that before COVID, air purification was really about allergy relief and asthma and breathing difficulties, right? Because small particles in the air will trigger your immune system if you breathe them in, and cause an adverse reaction. And so it's really was a concerns driven. You bought one because you had a problem you were trying to solve, or you lived in an area where the pollution was particularly bad, right, in a metropolitan area, or you had in California, parts of California or other places, you had wildfire concerns, and you wanted to get rid of the smoke, right? So, and then in that instance, right, there were two classes of air purifiers. There's the small $100 one you can go on Amazon and buy that makes a noise, but it's not going to do much, in a larger space. And then we make the one that if you really have a problem, you come back to. So if you look at our business before COVID, it's largely people that had a real problem. They might have bought something and they realized they didn't get the real product. So like if somebody says, Andy, I want to buy a motorcycle, I'm going to say to them, do you want the starter bike or do you want the real bike? Because the starter bike is the thing you try, but it's not good at any one particular thing. The real bike is the thing that's designed to really do the job. And then when COVID hit, what I would say is that it was always true before COVID that when the kids go back to school in the fall, the doctor's offices fill up. They do, because you're breathing shared air. You're in the same box, breathing shared air and exposed. It's just that we've accepted that, so many people are going to get, the flu, right? And they're going to get sick. And we just let the medical system deal with that. And we take inhalers, or we do all these other kinds of things, right, to solve for that problem. So even before COVID, I always believed that if our future of our company was to offer relief from disease transmission, whether it was COVID, whether it was flu, whatever it is, right? Because it's in the air. And I think we've firmly established that now, that, hey, it's in the air. People are getting sick because they are breathing in a shared airspace with somebody else. So to me, COVID just accelerated what I thought was always needed and possible, and that is to have a purifier in every school classroom, hotel room, restaurant, places where people gather, where I'm breathing recycled air from the table next to me, right?
Right.
So that's really, it's been a tragic accelerator, is what I would say.
And is there no practical way to address that type of thing on a more macro level, like with the HVAC systems that are commonly used now for the heating and cooling? That may be an ignorant question, but I'm just curious.
Not at all. It's not an ignorant question at all. I mean, and that's a lot of the default thinking. But see, here's the thing. HVAC systems are designed to move a lot of volume of air, right, efficiently because they're trying to control temperature and in a commercial building, humidity. Their job is to control temperature for comfort. In order to do that, move a lot of air, you can't restrict the airflow or it's not doing its job. Now, if I'm going to capture a virus particle, I have to run it through a filter like that. Now, this is a grade H13 HEPA filter that will catch a micron-sized particle, right? But I have to use a lot of air pressure to push air through this material.
Okay, got it.
If I stuck this in your HVAC system, it would slow it way down, right? So it's can HVAC systems help? Actually, they can by moving a lot of air, but by not restricting them. I mean, the reality is, I don't know how big your house is, but I would hazard to guess you're only breathing air in the room that you're in at a time, right?
Yes. That's not a trick question, right? Yes, I am.
You're only breathing where you are. And so the reality is you want to use your HVAC system to control the temperature of your home, but you want to use air purification locally in the rooms you tend to frequent the most and keep those rooms clean. Net, it's actually less expensive to do that. But your point is that when it comes to this question, you're right. People often go to, well, isn't that an HVAC thing? It really isn't, because an HVAC system has really no chance of materially removing the particle. They can move it around and disperse it, but they can't really capture it.
Okay. And so the business really, I guess, transitioned, well, maybe not transitioned, maybe not to be the right word, accelerated, because now everyone was afraid of the air that they breathe, where before no one was afraid of the air that they breathe, except a very small subset of people for whom they had a predisposed condition that made it that way. Now it's on everybody's mind. So what has that done to your business? You mentioned the schools, and I'm interested in learning more about how you're helping people, companies, institutions, organizations. But I also am curious, where do you think it's going to go? Because people have short memories too. You know, they tend to when a emergency is over, we kind of go back to, you know, we maybe not this time, but we've done that a lot in the past. So I'm curious to get you know way better than I do based on the people you're dealing with.
That's a great question. I think the reality is the air purifier is going to become the new security alarm, airbag, fire alarm, protective essential. Because if you think about it, you pay a monthly subscription for a security service for your home or for your business to award the slight chance that you're going to have a criminal activity or criminal event. The same is true for this virus particle, because the way COVID is different than H1N1 and others before it is that even with vaccines, you're still going to end up having to have some level of business continuity concern. So if you're in a restaurant, for example, and somebody gets COVID, it's going to impact your operational capacity in a greater way than the flu would, right?
Sure.
Because of how viral the thing is. So, and I think the other thing is what I've seen in behavioral side of things is that, and I hate to bring this up, but the world has not been the same since September 11th. We've not felt as safe as a society since terrorism was on display and demonstrated in such a tragic way with with the Twin Towers, right? And so what I am observing is that you got people that, I run a company, and so I've got people that are across the spectrum in terms of the level of personal fear. And this fear is highly personal. It's like a shark is in the water, and some people will go, well, I haven't seen one in a while. Must be good to get back in. And you got other people that go, I am not getting back in the water again,
No matter what, right?
no matter what. And you can tell now by you walk into a place and people that wear masks, the people that don't wear masks, people are going to get vaccinated, people aren't going to get vaccinated. So it is not something I think will go away in the same way that that the previous MERS, SARS kinds of things did. If you look at the recovery charts from those, they were dealt with fairly quickly and things snapped back. And with COVID, the problem with COVID is, and this comes not from me, but from a friend who's in that industry. He says it's a very robust particle. And because it mutates, it creates derivatives of itself. It's going to keep doing that. The fact that it's just engineered to be a highly, it's just durable. It makes it, an ongoing and continuing, challenge. So I think whether you believe in air purification or not, if you're the manager of a restaurant, if you're the HR VP of a company trying to get employees to come back and feel safe, you're going to want to do something, right, that brings that measure of safety up for everybody, whether you're wearing a mask, whatever you're going to do. So,
and when, just from a practicality standpoint, with your technology and your equipment, how close do I need to be to it so that I can feel safe no matter what's going on sort of around me? Like a restaurant or school or some type of environment like that?
Well, your proximity to it, if it's properly sized, is not so much an issue. What we try to do is turn the air volume over in a given space 4 to 6 times an hour. And if you do the math on that, if it's properly sized, it means that somebody could be infected with COVID sitting at a table next to you in the restaurant and you would never get it.
Okay. That's what I was going for. Yeah.
Right.
Huh.
Now, let me be careful. I can't make absolute claims. I mean, I say never get it. It's let me restate that. Your likelihood is far less.
Yeah, you can feel safer.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. Okay.
There you go. Thank you. Keep me out of jail.
I'm not here to get anybody in any trouble. Last question I'm going to ask you has nothing to do with air purification or whatever, but you mentioned failures at the beginning, that you've had plenty of failures, and I really haven't asked you about any failures that you've had. Maybe you got into the farm failing, but that wasn't really on you at the time. So can you share with me, something that, boy, if you had it all to do over again, Andy, you would?
I would say that gosh, so many to choose from. Well, I'll just use this one. I think I mentioned to you the industry consortia that I did when I was back in the semiconductor industry.
Yes.
And I got the industry together, the vendors, the customers together, and created this, or it led this consortia. And I think when we first started, the idea was we were going to create this standard for people to be able to connect their software and talk back and forth, on it. And the vendors at the time participated with smiles, because what they really thought was that they were going to be able to control the outcome. And so they put a lot of energy behind it, and it put me in the position of having to judge the motives of suppliers who had something at stake in this industry. And the short of it is that it failed. It failed because they never really wanted that to succeed, because they really wanted to protect themselves and their level of customer traction in the marketplace. And because I was the CEO of this thing that was public in that industry, it was a very public failure. And I remember going to a board meeting, and I said to them, I literally went there thinking, okay, we should just throw in the towel on this. It didn't work. But instead, I went in and said, you know what we forgot? We forgot that it's really always about the customer first. It's about the one we serve first. It's not about those that are doing the serving for their own interest. It's about the customer. Right. And so that organization changed its name in that meeting. We decided to change it from CAD Framework Initiative to Silicon Integration Initiative. We put the big semiconductor companies out front. We created a customer council. We reformulated the strategy and plan. And then we set about it again to be driven from that perspective. And so, it was a hard public lesson to learn, but it was one of, do not be confused about who the customer is. Keep your orientation that way. And I think the other one is that, if I was listening to my ego, I would have quit and moved on to other things. But because I really believed in what was possible in that space, I had to go. I had to be able to say, I have failed. This has failed. This is not going to get us any further. And what was miraculous about that, it was that the people who had been with it up to that point redoubled their commitment and actually put up more resources to carry it further forward, right? So, that's just there's all kind of failure, but there's not anything quite like public failure.
Right. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. And that failure has led to a lot of success. So I guess that's the flip side to that, right? If you
Yeah, I will share this with you. I went to South by Southwest, which is here in Austin, back when it was meeting. And I remember sitting in the audience and I was listening to a young guy. His name was Ben Silberman. He was the founder of Pinterest.
Okay.
And he was being interviewed by someone in Silicon Valley who you could tell he was basically trying to figure out, how did you do the thing you did, right? In other words, Pinterest had a fairly modest beginning with being sent to 100 by email to 100 friends. And I never forget Silberman's response. He says, well, failure is just the elimination of an option along a longer path. And I never forgot that. I thought, okay, that is so well stated, right?
Yeah.
We're playing the infinite game here, to quote Simon Sinek. So
Simon Sinek. Those are powerful words. I like that. It's almost as good as all progress starts with the truth. That's up there. Well, Andy, this has been so much fun. How do people find out more about you and Alen Corporation? How do they find out about your products? Where do you want people to go?
You can just go to alen.com, alen.com, and then you'll see what we do and why we do it. And there's a lot of information there. And then myself personally, I'm on LinkedIn, and if you just search Andrew Graham Alen in Austin, you'll find me.
Okay, awesome. Well, this has been great. I really do appreciate you coming on the show. I thank Cynthia for introducing us, or at least connecting us together. And I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and I appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Well, I thank you too, Mike. You strike me as also a caring and curious person as well.
I do my best. Okay, right. Thanks so much.
Okay, take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the How Did Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How Did Happen podcast.